I had a really good day yesterday. Some lovely conversations. Thank you. Whenever I go to the European TRIZ conference, I always come away and I'm angry. I'm pretty certain when I leave this conference I'm going to be very happy. So again, thank you. So the subject this morning is service innovation. And I thought I'd make this presentation follow on from what I was talking about yesterday. And the COBRA process, so a cyclical process for working on complex problems. So to start, one of the things that we've been doing in our research on business and matching hypotheses between the technical world of TRIZ and the business world of TRIZ, one of the parts of the TRIZ story that has worked the best with my clients has been the trends of evolution part of TRIZ, which I know when I read the classical TRIZ books is often seen as advanced TRIZ. I think with my clients they seem to find that that's the easy part of TRIZ. So when we started looking at business and business trend patterns, we knew that was, if we could find those patterns, it would be very important because I say clients seem to find that easier to tap into. And this is the very first trend pattern we could see in the business world. This comes from the work of Joe Pine and particularly a book called The Experience Economy. And what he'd identified was a number of very clear evolution stages in the way that businesses design the model with which they engage with customers. So we call this trend the customer expectation trend, and the idea is that commodity evolves to product. There's an S-curve, if you like, for your product business model. When that's matured, the way forward is evolve to a service. In some cases, the service business model has matured also. And the theme of Joe Pine's book is the next evolution stage is you sell the experience to the customers. And then he talks about a final evolution stage, again, another S-curve, which is all about transformation. So my focus this morning is on this transition here. Lots of product-based businesses evolving to a service. And in the UK, where I spend some of my time. Fortunately, I spend most of my time overseas, but service is over 3/4 of the economy in the UK. So if we want to do any significant TRIZ type work with clients in the UK, then pretty much you have to do service innovation because that's what most of the people are doing. From yesterday, I introduced this complexity landscape and the idea that if we've got two human beings involved in a system, then it is a complex system. And I showed this picture, but I didn't really talk about it yesterday. But here's, I would say, a classic service situation. Here's the British restaurant scene. Any of you that have been to the UK will know that we have the worst food on the planet. But even so, the restaurants have been told, and the staff in the restaurants have been told, it is a good idea to get feedback from the customer. So here's the process of obtaining feedback from the diner. And here's what the diner is saying. Now, what's not understood in this situation is that the job of the diner right now is not to give feedback. The primary job of this person is to make him go away. So what happens is he's saying the simplest thing, the most polite thing that will get rid of the waiter, and do it in such a way that everybody can be happy. But from an innovation perspective, the only useful information in this scenario here is this stuff here. Okay? So we've been very fortunate as our company has evolved over the years. And one of the biggest pieces of good fortune was working with Procter & Gamble in America. And the question we spent 5 years working with them on was, how do you capture this information? This is the information that nobody's saying, but is actually thinking. And from my perspective, we love it when we get clients that ask those kind of questions. And very often it felt like they should not be paying me to do the research. I should be paying them for the privilege of doing the research. Anyway, service innovation situation. For me, what this is trying to tell me is that it is going to be a complex problem because there will be human beings involved. And deep in that complexity is that very often the important stuff is not actually being said. Okay, so here's another UK example. This is one where I have to say we failed. Any of you that spend any time in the UK, here's a message that says, do not get ill. Especially do not get ill in this town here. This is the process for discharging a cured patient from the hospital. So a patient has been to the hospital with a problem. The problem has been fixed, and now the patient is going home. And this is the process for releasing the patient. Now, each of these things around the edge here is a department or a person, and each of these red lines is a communication between pairs of things. There are 197 lines on that picture. The challenge that we were given was this process is really expensive. We have no idea how to improve it. Can you help us? And as soon as we forced them to draw this picture to understand what the process was, but we very quickly began to understand that there is a real problem here, because as soon as I say, why do we have this communication, for example, nobody knows. We've always done that. And as soon as I then say, okay, well, why don't we just remove that? Everybody says, no, you can't possibly remove it because there are procedures that demand that we do that. And what you end up with is nobody dares to change anything in this system. Yeah? Innovation, I think, requires bravery. And in this particular hospital, nobody was brave enough to touch that system. So today, it is exactly the same system. All right. If we're talking about, say, a technical problem, there's a strong likelihood it will be a complicated problem. If it's a business problem, a service problem, it's inevitably, I think, going to be complex and therefore needs to be dealt with as a complex problem. I always think that, and I recommend when we're working with the client to build capability, is what I call the golden triangle. This is the place that the innovation team needs to be. You will be dealing with complex problems, and so therefore the capability of the system needs to be commensurate with that. Okay, we need to understand how complex systems behave, and what that means in practice is there will be a process that loops. There is an iteration. You cannot know what the right answer is. You can only know what the next best answer is in the next moment, and the moment after that, and then the moment after that. So it's a slightly complicated picture, but one of the things that we've been trying to do again to help companies to understand how best to innovate. So for example, should we introduce TRIZ into this company? We've been building a capability model. So those of you in the IT world will know, of course, about the Carnegie Mellon maturity model. Here's the innovation version of that. We did it with Duke University in the United States. We've seen 5 different levels of innovation capability inside an organization. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can also see 5 different kinds of innovation inside an organization. So at the bottom here, I can innovate my processes. If I'm a manufacturing operation, I can introduce a new manufacture process. In human relations, I can introduce a new succession planning protocol. Things that are inside the organization that the customer will not see. I can innovate my products, my services. I can innovate the way that we sell to the customer, the way that we deal with the customer. We can change the organization structure, and we can innovate at a societal level. And one of the things we're seeing is that service innovation really means these top three things here. A little bit down here, but predominantly, if I want to innovate services, then it's the top three things. Now, the yellow boxes signify the places, the situations where I have a possibility that I will be successful. So yesterday I was saying that 98% of innovation attempts fail. If I'm in these white boxes, it's pretty much 100% likely you're going to fail. In the yellow boxes, there is the chance that you will be successful. So what that means to me is that if you want to reliably do service innovation, then you need a level 3 capability. Now, I have to say that very few organisations on the planet have got level 3 capability, but the health service, for example, in the UK, very definitely hasn't. It's a level 1 capability, and so the only successful projects we're likely to see are process ones. What's the significance of this? Well, we need to know which kind of tools to use in which kind of situation. I think the difficulty for TRIZ, just coming back here for a second, is that some of the TRIZ tools, so you take something as simple as ideal final result as a tool, that's really a tool for this level 4 organisation. And consequently, we've had a lot of challenges over the years with clients where you start to talk about ideal final result and very quickly realise that there's nothing they can do about achieving anything close to that ideal. So what Cobra is all about is trying to adopt some of the fundamentals, the first principles from TRIZ, but enable organisations to make use of the process with a lower level of capability. Now, having said that, I think you still need to understand complex systems. So here's the process, and my point yesterday was it's cyclical. What that means is we do a bunch of things. We test then whether this solution is good enough. If it's not, then we go around the loop again, test again, go around the loop again. So potentially several times around that loop. So I thought today I'd just talk through some of the stages in a little bit more detail. Compass is the first step. So C stands for compass. And of course, this is where we do get ideal final result. And this idea of the equation that we all have inside our heads. Ideality, benefits divided by cost and harm. The tricky part, the most difficult part, is the perceived part. If the customer perceives that something's better, then it's better. Everything heads towards free, perfect, and now. And I deliberately word it like that because it's quite controversial inside organisations. But it's trying to say that in the service sector, that the evolution towards that happens much quicker than it does, for example, if we're in a mining company or in a construction company. I lived through that transition. So when I started at Rolls-Royce, we sold jet engines. If you want to buy one of those jet engines, it's about $14 million. Today, the business model is a service model. We do not sell you the product. We will sell you power by the hour. And 85% of all of the engines at Rolls-Royce are now part of that system. Now that required a substantial change in thinking on the part of the engineers, and it was seen as a big threat at first. But what very often happens when you make the transition from product to service is you get a whole bunch of side benefits that you didn't think about. And airlines like Ryanair and EasyJet and AirAsia and Wizz Air, they only exist because they're given free engines. So it's very easy to set up an airline these days. There's virtually no infrastructure cost at the beginning of the process. And Ryanair is the biggest airline in Europe. Here's how we present the ideal farm result in Cobra. So we try and get people to think about the ultimate ideal. What is the ideal? And we use this model of the cone here, which says that when you achieve the ideal, if we can ever achieve the ideal, then what that's trying to tell us is that the evolution process is convergent, because that is a point. And so as we get closer and closer to the ideal, there are less and less possibilities for how we're going to solve the problem. Then what we do is we allow people to back away from that ideal and think about what we've called here a pragmatic ideal. So what are we going to try and achieve in this project? Then we look at the O. So we've got a direction based on that. The O is all about outcomes. The customer wants an outcome. And here we take a lead from the Silicon Valley companies. So go and look at best practice wherever you can find it. What explains the success of the Silicon Valley companies, companies like Apple, particularly Airbnb, Uber, is they understand that the behavior of the customer is driven by both tangible and intangible functions. The tangible stuff is really easy to specify. If I'm going to go and buy a phone, then I decide what kind of camera I want, how much memory capacity I want, etc., etc. It's very easy to write that down. This stuff is much more difficult to ask the customer about. This is the emotional stuff. So why did you buy this brand of phone versus this brand? And for a long time, of course, Apple obtained a big premium for their products because they understood this intangible world far better than the Samsungs, the Huaweis of the world. What we learned inside Procter & Gamble is that you cannot go and ask the customer about this stuff. Yeah, it's things like trust. It's things like cool. You cannot go and ask a customer, how cool do you want to be? Yeah, because they have no idea how to answer that question. So you go back to first principles, and when you do that, we begin to realize that humans are quite simple creatures. As far as these emotional drivers are concerned, there are three primary ones that determine our behavior. All of us like autonomy. We all like to be in control of a situation. We all like to belong to something, and we all like to feel competent. And so from an innovation perspective, and this stage of the process, here's an example looking at Uber and some of these intangibles here. The biggest thing that Uber has done, I propose, their innovation, is they've put the passenger, the customer, in control of the transaction. No need to do any market research to know that people want to be in control of a situation. Yeah. And what the app gives you, of course, is that precise control. Yeah. So drawing this map, also worth mentioning a little bit is you look at the individual customer, you look at the people around them, because they may well have different requirements, and therefore an ability to look at bigger innovation opportunities. So, for example, peace of mind. In the UK, one of the big Uber opportunities right now is parents and their kids. So the kids will be in the Uber vehicle, but the parent knows what's going on. Yeah, and they're selling peace of mind to the parent. Again, no market research required to know that ABC, autonomy, belonging, competence, they need to get better. If any of those things is getting worse, then we know it's going to be in the 98% of failed innovation attempts. Very quick example, this is the fastest innovation project we've been involved in. This is with the health service in the UK. So this is patients who make an appointment to see their doctor and then do not turn up to the doctor. And so what the doctor does in this particular case is puts up this poster in the waiting room, and it's trying to remind patients to turn up for their appointments. So 32 patients did not turn up for their appointment last week. Unfortunately, when you understand ABC, you realize that the way the patient reads this is if 32 patients did not turn up last week, it's okay for me not to turn up next week. Yeah, and so the best intention gives the worst outcome. So we looked at the ABC model, and we looked at the process. And so here's a critical part of the process. Here's the patient making their next appointment. And what traditionally happens is the receptionist gives the patient a card which has had the details filled in. So we said, give the pen to the patient. Yeah, nothing else changes. Give the blank card and the pen to the patient and get the patient to fill in the words and the numbers. And that very simple change reduced the problem by 40%, because giving the pen is a sign of control. Yeah. It costs nothing to implement that, and that's saving literally millions of pounds in the health service at the moment. Okay. Final couple of things. I'm running out of time. I'm conscious. The next part of the process, B, is the contradiction part, and that says go and look for the contradictions. We call it yes, but. So this is what I want, but. And if you're in a complex environment, you'll typically find that there are lots and lots of yes, buts. There are lots of reasons why you can't do something. And so we've built a process. This is an example from a school, cleaning the school. What we've understood with complex systems is you can look at people's opinions. So that's what we've done here. How can we keep the school more clean is the question. Why can't we? Here's all the reasons why we can't. And then this column here is all about making a map connecting the different statements to each other. And the question there is leads to. Which of the other statements does this one lead to? And when you've done this thinking here, then you can draw a map that looks like this. And what you will find in that map is one or more of these loops here. And the significance of the loops, of course, they're trying to identify these things for you. Yeah, there's no such thing as a root cause in a complex system. What drives the behavior of the system are virtuous and vicious cycles. When we found, in this case, a vicious cycle, then we found a way to solve the problem and genuinely solve the problem. So solving it, here's the latest version of the business contradiction matrix that we've built. So very similar to the original Altschul matrix in its structure. Of course, these are all business parameters. And there's a whole cluster in the latest version of these intangible drivers of the behavior of the customer. So autonomy, belonging, competence, trust, for example, engagement, meaning, and exactly the same operating principle in terms of how we use this thing. So, for example, I want lots of new ideas inside my organisation, but lots of people are quite cynical about brainstorming sessions, etc. Intersection of row and column, we'll get a series of strategies. There's today about 400,000 case studies have gone into this database, and we typically add about 1,000 new cases each week, which should tell you that we've automated a lot of the process now. So we've built software tools that will find contradictions. So they'll read journal papers, they'll read management textbooks looking for contradictions. The manual part is then when we see people solving a contradiction, how are they doing that? And the taxonomy we're still using is the 40 inventive principles, because they seem to register nicely with customers. With the way we use them is we use each of the principles as a way of generating lots of ideas, or clues as we call it. So if you're in a complex environment, divergence, generate lots of ideas becomes important. Once you've generated lots of ideas, then you can start converging on the idea. So taking the lead from design thinking, very important part of the process for working on complex problems. Explore before you decide. What we tried to do then, I've got no time to go into the detail here, but effectively what COBRA is all about is a problem definition part of the cycle and a solution generation part, and they both have a divergent, convergent part. And then what we've been doing is taking the TRIZ tools and all the other tools that we use each of one or more of these jobs. Once you've been through the process, you've got some solution ideas, then you can test how good they are. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of this one, but that test then allows you to say, okay, have we finished, or do we need to go and iterate a second and a third time? I think the reason we got 98% failure rate so far is innovation is difficult. I think service innovation particularly so. I've got to find the right problem, generate the right solution for the right customer at the right time, the right price. Getting all those things right together is still, I think, shall I say, not quite a science. I think we're making progress, but a long way to go still. Again, thank you for inviting me, and the book, I should have brought more books with me. I've got this one's also committed now, but what I've just been talking about here, the whole of that process and the business matrix is in this thing here, which you'll find on the website in that part there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daryl. We have time for questions.
Hi, Daryl. Thank you very much. Я буду по-русски. Большое спасибо за прекрасный доклад. Очень много материала. Безусловно, сразу его все не переработаешь. Но у меня маленький вопрос. Скажите, пожалуйста, вы используете приемы те же, что были у Альтшулера, или специально их переработали для бизнеса?
Yeah, lovely question. We started with the hypothesis that Altshuler's trends could have an application in the business world. In some cases, the research confirmed the hypothesis. In some cases, the research showed that there was no relevance. And in other situations, we found that there were trends that we could see in business that there was no corresponding analog in the technical world. But certainly our start point was Altshuler's work on the patterns. So in our taxonomy, we've got 38 technical trends, and so far we've got 31 business trends.
Okay. Еще вопросы? Да, вот, хорошо, все.
Добрый день. У меня такой вопрос. Правильно ли я понял, что пример инноваций в услугах был приведен на компании Rolls-Royce, которая сначала продавала продукт, а потом перешла к услугам? Можете ли вы привести пример инноваций в услугах для компании, которая изначально занимается услугами, например, консалтинг или клининг? В чем это будет выражаться? Спасибо.
Yeah, so the National Health Service is, the hospitals, it's always been service sector, and hotels. If you look at our clients and the businesses we see, it tends to be, health services is a big one, healthcare, financial services, they originate as services, insurance in particular, and all those areas where there's a human contact, so tourism. So in India, particularly hotels and things like that.
Daryl, could you please move to the previous slide? Yes. I think besides all these conditions, probably right place is missing.
True.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I couldn't find a Google image that had enough. Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you.
Now I would like to announce the second speaker. Это будет Антон Кожемяка, управляющий партнер Ассоциации Бизнес TRIZ, с докладом.
Доброе утро.
Доброе утро. С докладом «Нетехническая TRIZ. Применение систематизации для постановки вторичных задач».
Схематизация.
Схематизация для постановки вторичных задач. Пожалуйста, Антон.
Спасибо. Так, сейчас вот либо этот, либо этот. Давайте вот этот попробуем. Нет, не он.
Я пока воспользуюсь
Вот
некоторой паузой. Хочу попросить все-таки
Так,
проверьте,
сейчас,
пожалуйста, все
подождите,
телефоны
подождите, ну-ка,
выключите,
секундочку.
пожалуйста.
Это что, одно и то же, что ли?
И чтобы не было...
Опа. Так, а что здесь, два одинаковых доклада, что ли? Да, ошибка. Здесь два одинаковых доклада. Сейчас мне нужно это перекидывать.
Я хочу немножко развеять небольшую паузу, поделиться своими впечатлениями об этой конференции. Значит, я сам не из TRIZ комьюнити, а, так сказать, сбоку. И мне очень нравится, что, как вот происходит общение, какие затрагиваются проблемы. Очень стимулирующее, то есть столько много новых идей и парадоксальных, в общем, направлений мысли, что, в общем, мне кажется, что такое вот собрание очень полезно. И мне также кажется, что неплохо было бы немножко даже расширять аудиторию, чтобы не только вот TRIZ-разработчики, но также и люди, которые заинтересованы в инновационном мышлении, в нестандартном мышлении. Такие люди есть во всех областях, так сказать, и науки, и бизнеса, и технологий. Поэтому мне хотелось бы сказать большое спасибо организаторам, которые, ну, хорошо проводят конференцию, что говорить. Вот поступило предложение, правильно. Если есть вопросы к Дарье Луману еще, пока у нас есть время, кто-нибудь хочет задать по поводу доклада, который был здесь? Вот еще есть доклад. Дарья.
Да, если есть возможность, да, я бы тогда еще хотел уточнить. Вы показывали модель компас. У меня сложилось ощущение, что это чем-то напоминает хади-циклы. Это похожие вещи или нет?
I think the answer is yes, I would say. I think one of the reasons that I draw the cone model that everything heads towards ideal final result, and that is convergent, is because as we look at other tools, other methods, there are many similarities between different tools, different methods. So that they're all, I think, pointing in the, if it's any use, it's all pointing in the same direction. And so wherever we see duplication, then what we tend to do is to find something that works with our clients the best. So very few of my clients want to spend time learning stuff. They want to solve the problem. So whatever tool works the most efficiently and quickly for them is the one that we tend to migrate towards. So for example, I love Sue-field analysis, but when we take that to our clients, and it may be the way I teach it, but our clients very often find it's way too abstract for them.
Даррелл, есть у меня еще один вопрос. Ты говорил, что у тебя есть там не последняя стадия идеального конечного результата, а отступал от него. В TRIZ есть такое понятие «шаг назад от ИКР». Это значит отступить очень и очень немножко, а потом думать, как достичь этого. Что по сравнению с этим у тебя?
When we talk about the ideal final result, then we allow the customer to step back, and what we call it the pragmatic ideal final result. So here's the ultimate ideal, and then the pragmatic is what do you think we're able to achieve in this project? And it's really putting the pressure back on them. Yeah, so it's this thing here. So we allow our clients to decide how far back from that do they want to go. So to give you an example, the school, the project with this thing here later on, keeping the school clean, the ideal we wrote down was the school cleans itself. When we talked to the school principal and the superintendent, then their view was if we can reduce the cleaning staff by 50%, that's what we would like to achieve. So that was what they decided to do at that point. I think the reason I'm okay with that is because the process is iterative. If the process tells us that actually you could do much better than that, then of course we can change this pragmatic ideal. But the iteration allows us to effectively start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere and then evolve from that start point.
Thank you, Daryl. Now our next speaker.